Hello. Welcome to my first YouTube Live. Thanks for joining me. I'm excited. Hello, hello. How you guys doing out there? Welcome. Can everyone hear me? Am I live for you? Let me know in the chat box if I'm live for you. Awesome. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. It's always a little different without pictures of people. Hello, Giant Loop. Hello, Harold. Thank you. I'm so honored to be at your garage night. I would love to be there in Bend, but I'm joining you from Arizona. We actually had a nice little heat wave today, so I've been enjoying my AC, but thank you for inviting me to do a live at your garage night. And my name is Danell Lynn. I am a Giant Loop ambassador. I rode through all 50 states and 3 provinces in Canada with Giant Loop fully kitted bags for my Triumph Bonneville. I also broke a record on that ride for the Guinness World Record books. And so I've been with Giant Loop for well over 5 years now, and I've taken my bags and my kit from them through Pakistan, through Mexico, through the US, through Canada. It's been a great ride that we've had together, so I appreciate Harold inviting me for the garage night. So tonight, I'm just going to kind of leave it up in the air for a Q&A. It's meant to be kind of a campfire style. I'm not sure how much you know of me or my background, or if you have really specific questions, but I am an adventure rider. And Elmo is telling me in the chat box he cannot get in. Is there a link on the photo? You can just go directly to my YouTube, Elmo, if you can hear me. But their link should be on the photo, yes. And Harold, you at Giant Loop, you guys are in, right? You can see me? You're good? Okay. So is there any questions from the audience kind of about my background or anything like that? Thank you, Harold. I appreciate that. I did a 1-year career break from working, and I took a year off work and went on the road on a Triumph Bonneville and rode through all 50 states and 3 provinces in Canada. The Guinness World Record is only for the lower 48. When I traveled into the border into Canada, it actually stopped the record, but my goal for myself for that year was to hit all 50 states, so I continued the ride. I am still riding today. It's actually my only mode of transportation. I chose not to buy another vehicle when I got back from that ride, and so I just use my motorbike and my bicycle right now, and I'm in a very urban city living in downtown, so it works out just fine. What inspired my trip? So the inspiration really came from just living fully and getting out there. I just kind of had this idea that I wanted more from what I was doing with my travel. I've been traveling since I was very young, and I was on a trip down to, where did I go? Peru, and I met 2 individuals from Australia that were riding from Alaska to Argentina. And that was probably the catalyst that actually made me go, because I just got to chatting with them and we hiked Machu Picchu together. And I just really realized I wanted a big trip. So on that flight home, I decided that I would save for 2 years and then take off on some grand adventure. At that time, I didn't know where it was going to necessarily be or how I would do it. I didn't know at that time I would be going for a Guinness World Record either, but that all kind of came together as I planned the trip. The further back inspiration probably came from childhood, because I've been in traveling and experiencing other cultures ever since I was very young. And when my father got stationed, he was in the military, and when he got stationed in Europe when I was in elementary school, we really started to explore a lot of other cultures, because that really opened borders and ability for us to travel. Excellent. Pappy Scrappy, I love your screen name. What made you choose the Bonneville? I always get this question. So it is a 2000 and, oh my goodness, poor Amelia. She's 6 or 7. She was the last year that was carbureted. So she's not a fuel injected model, but she's not a 1970s. She actually did very well on the road. But I chose a Bonneville because I've always loved the bike. Steve McQueen made it look sexy. It's just a bike I loved. I have always had an interest in the Triumph Bonneville, and I actually was between the Triumph Bonneville and the Scrambler. I was deciding between the 2, and I just went and rode my bike that's now called Amelia I bought it used off of Craigslist, and I just went and rode it, and that was the bike. I handed him the cash, and that's when it kind of all started. So excellent question. Yeah, Bonneville just came from my love of that bike. Very nice. Thank you for your questions, guys. Yeah, throw them at me. This is really just campfire talk, but as I wait for questions, I'll just tell you more about my story. So with that side note of the Bonneville, I've ridden a bunch of different bikes because when I do travel abroad, a lot of times I'll rent bikes. So I had smaller Hondas when I was going through Pakistan, and really cute little bikes through Cambodia. I think I was on a 150 in Cambodia, and it was actually more than enough for me in some of those single track dirt roads. So I was happy with the speeds it could do. And then my very first bike on my first trip was before my all 50 states in Canada. I actually took a solo trip down into Costa Rica and rented a bike internationally for the first time. And I thought, well, this will be my test to see if I can do it, how I like it. And so I got this really cute little dirt bike that was aptly named Freedom. And so it was just a testament to the fact that I definitely needed to go and be doing what I was out there doing. I think that whatever bike you choose, people always question Triumph Bonneville for one reason, because it was really made as a city bike. And I went ahead and I went out and I took it around the country. I did have a British Customs gel seat, so I did upgrade my seat. And then I also rode in Motoskivvy's padded briefs at the time. They didn't have the women's line, but I wore the men's briefs, and they worked very well for the type of bike I was on. Paul, thank you so much for that question. Do you have a boyfriend? If so, how does he cope with your adventures? So I always end up getting personal questions like that, and that's one that I just don't really ever go into. I keep my relationships and my personal life very personal, but I do appreciate that question. Thank you. I hope that if you're questioning because of maybe a spouse or a significant other in your life, that maybe adventures are hard, you could do paired adventures, or just really, if that's a big part of who you are. It's been a big part of who I am since I was very young. So that kind of comes with the package, if you will. So it's not really something that someone who is with me would have to cope with. Thanks though, Paul. Let's see. What made you decide to go for the record? So about 2 years before I left on my trip, I decided I would do all 50 states in Canada. And part of that came from growing up and traveling so much and realizing, because I have some family members in my extended family, I have an aunt and uncle that don't ever travel outside the border, so they just don't. And I realized I wanted to show a lot of what was in our backyard, and I've really loved national parks ever since I was a kid. So settling on the US it kind of made sense to me. It was my home country. If I'm going to spend a year out there, there's a lot for me to see, a lot to do, a lot for me to share and inspire for other riders. And then about a year before I left, I don't remember exactly what sparked it, but I thought, oh, I wonder if this could be a Guinness World Record. And so I actually applied for something. I forget exactly what I asked for, but it was something like first woman to ride a Triumph Bonneville through all 50 states in Canada or something crazy. It was like super long, and they declined, and they said, well, no, but you can try to break this record. And so it's for longest journey in single country by motorcycle. And they did tell me the record gets broken often. It'll never make the record books, but you can try and break it. And while you're out there, people will probably break it. While I was on the road, the one I was going for was broken twice, so I decided I would double the record so that I could finish my trip and then hopefully hold it. And that actually worked in my favor. We held the record long enough that I made Amelia and I made the 2018 record books. So we did actually make the Guinness World Record books, even though they thought we never would because it gets broken so often. So that's really exciting. Elmo, thank you. Yeah, my bike is named Amelia, specifically for Amelia Earhart. So I have quite honestly been a fan of her since I was a kid. I think she's an amazing adventurer. She's very, very confident in what she does. She goes for her dreams. And I say it in almost a present tense because I talk about my bike as Amelia. One of my favorite stories from my trip, though, in naming my bike Amelia Earhart, is what I call my gas station gentleman. I would always meet these really nice gentlemen at the gas station, and they typically were from a generation that rode the older Triumphs. And because of the way Triumph makes their bikes, it looks like it's a 1970s Triumph, even though it's not. And so they'd always come up and talk to me. A few would be shocked when I take my helmet off and they're like, "You're a girl." And I'm like, "Hello." But the best one, he gave me $2 for a cup of coffee. And he asked me about my bike, and he wanted to donate for a cup of coffee. And so he asked me about my bike, and I was telling him the story, how I came across the name. And just with the sternest face, he just said, "So you named your bike after an adventurous woman who never came back from her adventure." And I just stood there for a minute and I was like, "Yep, you're exactly right. But hopefully I come home from mine." So that's my funniest story about my naming the bike, because I can tell you when I named her, I wasn't thinking about the fact that Amelia Earhart disappeared. So it did take me a little while to name the bike. I had her, wow, for over 6 months before I came across the name. I wait for it. My first bike was a Yamaha, and it was actually a boy, so it was named Stanley. So it just kind of depends. I think the bike talks to you for sure. Giant Loop, excellent. And why that particular adventure? The particular adventure to all 50 states? Or for the year? So the particular adventure, can you rewrite that one for me? What adventure are you questioning, and why that particular adventure came up as a question? The year-long trip, the trip to all 50 states, why on a motorcycle? Because I have done a lot of different types of travel, overlanding, motorcycle, hiking. Pretty much, I'm just addicted to adventure. I think that it's a big part of who I am and the way I live my life. I actually struggle when I don't have it for long periods of time. So this summer I was in the process of planning with a friend that I met on the Pakistan ride, because it was 12 women riding through Pakistan, and I met a very good friend there. And we were in the process of planning a trip within Africa. We were deciding between 2 different countries. And so then COVID hit. So everything's kind of been on hold, but we'll definitely pick back up on that adventure, and I'll keep you guys posted on it. There will be for sure a YouTube about it. Yes, the record. So why the particular adventure for that record? So when I decided to break the record, I didn't realize everything that would come with it. They first send you a packet that's really huge of everything you have to follow. So it's definitely an extensive process that sometimes when you're out there, and a big part of my trip was camping and just that solo side. And so having to constantly get a piece of paper signed was a little bit inhibitive, if you will, of some of the things I wanted from the trip, but I got used to the flow pretty quick. And then Guinness World Record also realized I was camping, because they have your satellite tracker. So they know sometimes when you're camping out in the middle of nowhere that obviously there won't be people around to ever sign that. So as long as you have it up to a certain point. But I decided to do the record because part of my trip for me was to help inspire future riders and inspire future generations, and to just kind of get the word out about the beauty that the U.S. holds and the fun of motorcycling and traveling. And so that's kind of how it became such a public trip. And I had done a lot of different PR work and press work with my fashion design company here in Arizona before I went on that trip. So I had some of those connections already established. And so when I went, it did help that I was going for a record. It helped with the story. And it also helped get out there and inspire a lot of students. I didn't realize the impact I would have on students. And so I have a book called Philanthropic Wanderlust that's about my first 5 years of my humanitarian companies that I run. And I rewrote that book into a young reader's edition before I went on the road so that I could donate that to schools. And my very first day of this trip, I went to southern Arizona, to Tucson, to a low-income school, and wanted to donate my first set of books there. They had the talk all set up. They had the students ready. And it was just so much fun to ride up. And this school has a chain link fence all around the outside play area. And all of a sudden I see all these kids running. And I thought, oh, that's cool. They must be on recess. And I'm riding. And this is in September. So about 2 days before today. So really close to the same time. So it was really hot. So I was very sweaty. And I'm riding and I'm coming along. And there's all these kids running. And I'm like, wow, they're like following me. And they followed me all the way into the parking lot. They ran up to me, and one of the young girls had said that she wrote a story for her school newspaper. So the impact of just that first day let me see what this trip could be for inspiring future riders and future generations. And I think that really kind of changed how much PR I was doing on the trip, I added a lot more so that I could reach a lot more people, because I realized how beneficial it was, to a certain extent. In our tech world and in our generation, I'm still probably someone who is very separated from it. I'm not as involved as other riders are, because I do very much still value that helmet time that I need, that definitely isn't involved in technology. So I went on a tangent with that question. So great question. Thanks for that. What mods did you make to Amelia? Yeah, so the seat is one of them, the aftermarket British Customs gel seat. And then I also put their silencer pipes on her. Now, she was a used bike, so there was some airflow changes that the previous owner had made and some filter changes for speed. And I don't think it affected the breathability, but supposedly made it breathe easier. I had some problems actually in rainstorms because of one of the filter adjustments. But so that was kind of a modification. But I also modified the handlebars. So I put in risers. When I was first riding it, I got really bad back pain really quickly. I'm kind of an 80-year-old man. I have bursitis in my shoulders. So I had to put in risers in order to be comfortable enough on the bike. So that's really the biggest modification I did. I didn't do very much at all. The bike is just a rock star of a bike, and it did fantastic. And then I stayed up with my maintenance on the road, and she's still rocking on now. So she's a very good bike and went really well for me. Oh, thank you. Thank you, B Green. Awesome to hear this story. Very proud to know you. Thank you so much. Pappy Scrappy, how do you still use the Lone Rider motor tent? How well do they hold up and how durable? Excellent question. Yes, I still do use the Lone Rider tent. I actually have their larger tent with the garage, and then I have their mini moto tent as well for smaller. You can even use that one for backpack camping. My Lone Rider tents, so I use the mini moto less often than I did the big one, because I got that one partially through my trip is when they released that one. And the larger one was amazing. I haven't actually had a tent that did so well. So I was caught in some pretty big rainstorms, and you don't have to use any groundproofing. You don't have to use a tarp or anything. It's built into the tent. And I actually opened my tent at one point in a storm in South Dakota, and the water was running underneath. And I stayed completely dry inside. So that to me was a testament to that tent. And the other thing that was a testament for me was when I was in Kansas and surrounded by tornadoes, not super close, but I was in a city trying to stay away from them, but the winds were really high, and my tent would literally flap down, like hit my face and pop back up, and hit my face and pop back up. A few times the stakes came out, so I had to go out in the storm and restake. But it all held up, and I had no tears, no bending poles, nothing. So it held up really, really well. And thank you for asking about that tent. I forgot to talk about that because I lived in a tent and camped through all 50 states. I pitched a tent in all 50 states. And I also did homestays with friends. I saw friends and family I hadn't seen in a really long time. And then I occasionally would stay in hotels, like in El Paso when I was out running an ice storm from Oklahoma into Texas. So I stayed in a hotel for 3 days when a really bad hit. Do you have any specific advice for someone who wants to go on a long journey, not necessarily a year? Absolutely. Do some small tests first. So I've traveled solo a lot before I went on the road for a year with my own mind. So first you got to know if solo travel is what you want. If it's not, that's fine too. You know, a lot of people have really amazing travel buddies. So you first got to find what your niche is going to be, and then give yourself some test trips. Do your weeks off, do little test trips and see how they go. A week-long trip on a motorcycle is going to be a great test trip for something that's a little bit longer, because in that week, you're going to find out what parts ache and what adjustments you need to make to the bike and your packing. I have launched something called Adventure Finances. It's on Instagram. And it's a new site, and it's also on my website, danelllynn.com. You can sign up for the newsletter. I do have a course that's launching. I'm doing another webinar at the end of this month to talk about it, and it does talk specifically about how to plan for the financial side of that, if you were asking that side at all. Yes, Cody, Amelia like Earnhardt. Earhart, yeah, Amelia Earhart. Sorry about that. Yeah, I talked a little bit about her earlier, so that is what my bike is named for. Thank you, Cody. Marvin, speaking of rain showers, what wet weather gear did you use? Lean towards waterproof gear, or do you run waterproof overlayers? So yeah, I had overlayers. I had the full piece Revit rain suit. So I really enjoyed that suit. It kept me fully dry, except for in one storm that I was in, which I don't think anything could have, because I really thought I was about to drive through a tornado. I actually stopped on an overpass to call my brother, which, before I talk about that, I should let you know. So this was at a time I didn't have a smartphone. I'm very much not of my own generation. So I still had a flip phone, and I didn't have a GPS that I could look anything up. So I was completely unconnected. I had a spot tracker just for my waypoints to go to Guinness World Record, and so people who were following the trip could watch it happen. But so I was traveling up, where was this? Missouri, I think. And it was a really bad storm coming through, and I had heard it was coming through, but I thought I could outrun it. I was trying to make it to a friend's house, and the rain started going sideways. Sticks were flying sideways. I'm on the highway leaning into the rain. I'm driving through puddles at this point, and I thought, I might be driving into a tornado. I don't know. So I stopped, posted sideways on my bike, called my brother from my cell phone, and just said, tell me, look it up, tell me. He looked it up really quick, and he said, you're almost out of it, just keep going, because stopping under that was actually harder than riding, because the winds were so bad, and it was just flooding. So yes, I used waterproof overlayer, and I only had it fail once, which wasn't really a fail. It was just such an intense storm. I don't think there was any way to not get soaked. What was your favorite part of the record ride? Highlights and favorite moments? Absolutely. Yeah, so some of my favorite moments on the ride happened off the ride. So one of the biggest things for me, so I went to university, I went to my first college right out of high school from Texas to Miami, Florida. So I was a college student for 2 years in Florida, 1920. So I was working full-time, had an internship, and going to school full-time. So there was a lot of Florida I didn't experience at that age. And so going back there and being able to go swim with the manatees in northern Florida was probably a major highlight for me. I loved them. I had no idea how fun they were to just swim around. They're like a giant floaty fat dog. They're super cute. They roll over and you can scratch their belly, and they come up, and they're actually kind of blind. So if you sit with your life vest and just float, they will come up to see if you're one of them. And so they come and they put their whiskers to your face, and it's called a Manatee Kiss. And it was probably one of the neatest things that I've experienced. It was a lot of fun. That and just the variety of experiences that you have no idea that are coming. Like, obviously my brother, I've known him my whole life, but he had started fly fishing since he was an adult, and we had never experienced that together. So when I visited them in Washington, he taught me how to fly fish. Which I'm really glad that he knows how to tie a lot of little different flies, because I kept snapping the line and breaking them. So I felt really bad, but he said that it was okay. So part of the experience is the highlight of the people you meet. Part of it is just the genuine nature. I stopped at a campsite on my way to North Carolina. I was trying to make it up for a talk the next morning. And so I went to a campsite. They were totally full. There was no space. So I drove around it, and I saw some people outside their RV, and I said, you have a really big space. Can I pay you for part of it and pitch my tent? And they said, oh, just join us. They let me pitch my tent. They knew I was leaving at like 2 o'clock the next morning. I had to leave really early to make it up to do my speaking engagement. And they made me dinner. They invited me in their RV. It was just lovely. And I met a lot of those people at different campgrounds. When I did do the official campgrounds, I always met really genuine people, and everyone always wanted to come and like talk about things. It also was funny, because a few different times people came to me as I was packing up the next day to leave, and they said, oh, we would have invited you for dinner or breakfast, but we thought your partner would come soon, and we never saw them. And so I just said, oh no, I'm just by myself riding, and it always sparked up fun conversations. So that's another part that's really fun. The highlights really for me also was the nature. I mean, it's pretty amazing how small you feel riding through some of these national parks and mountain roads, and just vast open land and nobody around for miles. So that to me was pretty magical, because in such a populated world that we live in, it's pretty nice to have that time to actually feel small. Hi there. I believe your record, I believe the record you used a Triumph motorcycle. Just wondering what made you think to use that particular bike. Yes, hi Ivan. We did already talk about that a little bit, but thank you for asking that. I chose a Triumph because I just love the bike. So the reason I ride a Triumph is because I love the Triumph. I'm not anti any other bikes. I ride multiple bikes. I think you just take the bike that fits you, that you love, and then that's the right bike for your ride. What campground or national park was your favorite? Oh my goodness. So that's like asking me what's my favorite country, right? So that's a hard question for me because so many are so different, because camping in Olympia is not the same in camping in the Everglades, Florida. So it's just not the same. They're not comparable. But I had a few that really stood out, probably because of the area and the people. So there was one, and I can't remember the name of the campsite, so I apologize for that one, but it was in Louisiana and Texas, and it was really empty. And so I got a really great spot right by the water, and the rangers there, because there was only like 3 other people, I ended up extending for 3 nights and just staying there and making campfires and reading my Kindle all day, because they just kept bringing me firewood and checking in on me. And so it was great. And so I just kept this beautiful fire going. It was really relaxing and peaceful. And so that was really nice as well. And then always Zion, the National Park Zion is a favorite of mine. I like to hike through there. And excuse me, and Yellowstone. Yellowstone is also a really top one for me. And then, so I did the national parks, and I am that geek who bought my national park passport book. So I was, the 30-year-old with her stamp book behind the 7 and 8-year-olds waiting in line to get my stamps. But I love it, and I went to a lot of national parks with it. And then you can also go to historic sites as well. So if you're planning a trip through the U.S., definitely get that $80 annual pass, because you can go and see a lot of things as you travel through. How would you recommend paying for the financial requirements of long-term travel? Is that what your new venture is focused on? Yes. So the Adventure Finances is focused specifically on that. You nailed it on the head. That's exactly what it is. And the reason it came about is because I've been speaking now professionally about that ride for quite a few years now. And I always get that question about finances, or how'd you do it? Are you a trust fund baby? Did you win the lottery? Were you fiscally sponsored? The answer to all of those is no. What I did was old school. I saved for 2 years. And I talk about a few other ways to increase that budget and to pick up some side hustles and some different ones that I currently do that are funding my future budgets for travel. So that is exactly what the new venture is focused on. It's a web course to help people to kind of dig into that financial side. And I'm not a CPA, but I am a financial nut. And I do read a lot on it, and I get asked about it a lot. And so that's where it came from. It came organically because I was answering that question for so many people. And I thought, this is something that a lot of people might really want the answer to. So that is where it came about. So yes, you're exactly on point with that. You incorporate philanthropy into your travels and adventures. Tell us more about that. Yes. So in 2008, I started a company called, I started 2. So I have a fashion company called DL Couture, and then I have an art company that I ran a studio and a fine art gallery. So when I opened both of those companies, I wanted to make sure they had a philanthropic element to them. So each of them kind of has a charity associated with it, but it's not a charity. It's just a humanitarian organization. So DL Couture has Threading Hope, which is a company that now receives a lot of donations of handmade quilts, and we take them to children and families in need in the developing nation. And the other one is Project Highwire, and I take art kits and school supplies in a backpack to students in orphanages or hospitals in developing nations, and I provide a therapeutic art lesson to them and then leave them with those supplies. Part of my background is in education. I have over 15 years in special education and state education. That is a mixture of what my background is. So it is definitely varied and mixed. I also have a degree in fashion design, and I do that as well. So that is how that piece came into my travels. And now, probably for the last 8 years or so, if I'm traveling internationally at all, I'm always trying to pair those trips together so I can do a humanitarian project at the start and then have an adventure trip after it internationally. So I definitely do incorporate that throughout my adventures. Thank you. You guys had some great questions. That first 30 minutes flew by. Any other questions? Yeah, so with Project Highwire or Threading Hope, those both have websites, so you can find any information on all of the topics I'm talking about and all of the things I'm involved in on my main website, which is just danelllynn.com. I'll throw it in the chat box there for you, but it's just my name. Really, really easy one. So tips for motorcycle travel, packing gear, and tools. Absolutely. So tips for motorcycle travel. There's a ton of those, right? And it really depends on what what trip you want to take is really how you're going to pack for it. I found a lot of my packing and my supplies really came from the backpacking world. So I went in and I would spend hours at REI. The poor people at REI, I would literally like set up my own little camp area in a corner where nobody was. I was testing cooking equipment. I was laying it all out. So it's just lots of different tests that you do. And then I did test runs at Overland Expo. Like my first Overland before I was leaving, I went and packed out like I would for my trip. So that, in terms of the packing, I mainly stuck to backpacking supplies. In terms of the gear, all of my gear on Amelia, all of my motorcycle gear, my bags and kits was from Giant Loop. So I had the Siskiyou panniers, and then I had the Fandango tank bag. And then I also really love the Possible pouches. So I had that inside my pannier bag, and that held some of my tools in my kit, some of my emergency stuff for the bike. And it was a great way to just layer that in the bottom because it's heavy. And so it could just sit right in the bottom. The Possible patch went right on. It was perfect. And in terms of tools, my dad and I actually spent a good amount of time one weekend just taking the tools out and trying every nut and bolt and screw and hex and everything that was on the bike to match what I needed for my trip. So I only took the tools that were exactly what my bike needed. So that's how I narrowed my tools down. I didn't just buy a full kit. And because my bike is a mixture, because I have some that aren't metric and some that are metric, because the bike has kind of undergone some different changes when it went through. But yeah, so my tools were kitted out based on testing. And then gear, I did ride in full motorcycle gear. So I rode with Revit. I had a Revit suit, and my helmet was a Shoei helmet. I rode with Revit boots and Revit helmet. So I was all Revit on that trip. Have you talked about your college degrees and how do they help you on the road? So yeah, I love learning just about as much as I love adventuring. So I have a collection of degrees. So I'm working actually right now on my 4th for international education. So yeah, I think they definitely help you on the road because they help expand your knowledge. Anytime you're expanding knowledge, you're expanding your life. So you don't have to do it as a college degree. You can just do it through reading or through meeting people. But definitely, I think that they have helped me on the road. I think they've helped me with some of my connections and some of my speaking engagements, just because of having those initials and having those behind me has helped in some academic situations. It was really nice when I was speaking at universities that I had that kind of connection with the students there. Marvin, was there ever a time abroad where being from the US received less than favorable reception? I've not had it in Ecuador, Costa Rica, Spain, or any place, but wasn't sure about other places. So caveat for that is when you travel, everyone will have a completely different travel experience. So I could go to a country and have a horrible experience, and you could go and have an amazing one, and vice versa, right? So same with the oh, hey, as a magpie fly, she's here. Hi, she just got back from a big trip across the U.S. I love it. Thanks for coming. No wonder. Thanks for being here. So I got sidetracked on the chat. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, so definitely through your travels, you're going to experience different things. I've never had a super unfavorable reception anywhere. I actually have had the opposite. I've only had one time where I was treated where I thought at first I was being treated a certain way because I was a woman on a motorcycle. And it was in Mexico, and I hadn't had it all through Mexico. And I thought, that's weird because I'd been to Mexico multiple times and it never happened. But they were refusing to serve me gas. Now, let me preface, this was during the last election, and my bike says Triumph. So we realized I was riding with a few other people, and quickly, with my limited Spanish, I was understanding that he wouldn't serve me gas because I was supporting Trump. So I had to put painter's tape over my Triumph logo on my tank in order to get gas throughout the rest of my trip. And that actually alleviated any of the uncomfortable situations that were occurring. So that was probably the one that's the most recent. I've never had any really serious threats to my life. I've been pickpocketed in different places, but I don't feel like I was unfavorably received because I was from the US. And maybe initially you might have that in conversations, but once you're open to people, they'll be open to you. So I think that part of it is how you come across as well. So when you're traveling, if you're very open, you were saying like you haven't had any issues in Ecuador, Costa Rica, Spain. I haven't either in any of those places. And probably part of it is if you're traveling and you're ready to experience and explore that area for what it is, more of an anthropological view than to go in and change it and westernize it, then you're probably going to have a really great reception. How do you deal with food when you're camping so often? Yes, so I am a vegetarian. And so I took a lot of dehydrated foods on my trip. And my grandmother and my mother actually played around a lot with different foods. And I would get little care packages sent to me. And I had an entire pannier. So the Siskiyou panniers, one whole side was just a food bag. So not only am I a vegetarian, I'm also a big foodie. So I love to eat. So it was important to me to make sure I had that space to be able to have that on the road. And yeah, I cooked my meals when I was camping. I cook at home as well. I enjoy eating and being there. So no worries on that question at all. Let's see, which parts of the Midwest were the most interesting and how do you deal with the boring parts? Yeah. So again, it just kind of depends what's going on. I try to find really unique things to see, like the largest ball of twine or the centermost spot in the US, in the contiguous US states. So you find little fun, quirky things to see in areas that don't have as much of an offering that overwhelms you. You have to kind of navigate and find these little tidbits of exploration for sure. I never really found that anything was super boring. Per se, even long open roads with not a whole lot to look at give you a lot of helmet time. So I just would put on some good tunes on my headset inside my helmet, or a book on tape, or a podcast, and just keep riding and rocking it. So yeah. All right, let's see. Just want to say hi. Have you considered writing out a more in-depth book about your U.S. trips other than the book on your blog posts? Thank you for asking that. So behind me here, this is the book she's referring to, which actually everyone who's on here that has asked a question, I'll see in your live chat. Please make sure you follow me on Instagram. I'm going to do a random drawing for any new followers, and you have to tag another person to follow it. And then I'm going to go ahead and send you a free book. So I'm going to do a random drawing to send out a free book to you guys. That's the one she's referencing in her question. So this is the book that is, I call it my raw book, because it's a raw book just based on my blogs. So that way you don't have to scroll through the whole website. You can just check out the book and read the blog postings, and it comes with the pictures and everything inside and the descriptions of how it all went. And your second question about a more in-depth book about your U.S. trip is actually still in process. So I'm hoping, yes, to have that out with a major publisher is the goal within the next year or so. Absolutely. For those of us with a daughter or two, what could you tell us to keep them motivated in the love for adventure and the open road? Great question. So I can only speak from my personal experience and how I was raised as a daughter. So I grew up with two older brothers, and my dad made sure that I also had skills that my brothers had. So my mom and dad raised me almost, I guess, in a gender neutral term, if to use one of the newer coined terms. Before I could drive my first car, my dad made sure that I knew how to change my oil and change my own tires. So there were things that we had to do before we got things, no matter if I was a daughter or a son. And I think that really helped me feel more comfortable with adventuring, because I feel like I was limited due to my gender at all. I've never had that feeling in my life, which is actually a blessing, I guess. I've never had to experience that feeling. And so for those of you with daughters, I say to keep them motivated for the love of adventure is just to keep people in their lives and around them that are adventurous. Like, make sure to give them those books. And they have young reader books on Amelia Earhart. They have amazing books on women adventures and history that are out there that your children can read and your children can look up to. I have a really great young lady who's been following me, and she contacts me every year. She sends me pictures. She's been following me since the beginning of my journey, and she is probably 10 now, I want to say 10 or 11. And she's going to grow up to be future riders, right? And a future adventurer. And so it's really important to foster that side. And I think the way that you'll keep the love for that adventure and the open road is just to let them have that exploration, even when it scares you. I know that even though my parents raised me so adventurously, it scares them some of the trips I do, because I'm just drawn to go to a certain place and I'll just go. And so part of that, not limiting their love for adventure, is just knowing that you're scared, but letting them go. Even when they're older, like you're still letting them go, you know? So I think that that's the best thing you can do for raising daughters with an adventurous mindset. Excellent. I'm glad you're excited about the book. I know. It'll come. It'll come. I promise. It's slow, but it's coming. Good. Great questions, you guys. Any other questions? Adventure questions? Riding questions? Are there state parks that you were pleasantly surprised with? Yes. What was the name of the one? Oh my goodness. I want to say it was in South Dakota. It was a state park. Custer State Park. I had no idea that I don't know. I'd never even seen pictures, and I just happenstance just took it. So I used Rand McNally maps on the road. So another caveat of me not being connected. And on my Rand McNally map, I would look at kind of what was around me and plan my route and highlight where I wanted to go. And I went into this Clive Custer State Park as a cross path to get from one place to another. And I didn't even realize I was entering it first. And it was beautiful. It has these huge towering rocks that just shoot up, and it has this beautiful lake up at the top. And so that one really surprised me because I wasn't expecting it at all. And there was another one, North Dakota, or was it also South Dakota, that I didn't know about. That was also a smaller state park, but was a beautiful camping ground. And that one I would have to look up for you. So I apologize. I'm not remembering the name of that. It was named after a president. I do remember that. It's something named after a president. Oh no, did I freeze? Can you guys still hear me? I'm frozen on my side, but I'm going to assume you can still hear me. Okay, perfect. All right, let's see. How long were you on the road before it felt like the trip was real? Was it immediate or did it take some time? Great question. It actually was not immediate, and I'm not sure why the picture is frozen. So I'm going to just, well, maybe it'll come back. I didn't feel like it at first. And when I first went out, I actually really struggled with having back pain, which was weird because I'd taken some trips on my bike before. So I wasn't really sure where that pain was coming from. And it did end up going away. And then I could feel like I started to get in my groove. But it took me a few weeks to actually really feel like I was out on the road. And it was hard at first to actually let go of connections that I still felt like I needed to have. But I took leave. Well, I retired pretty much, but I came back. But I left my job for a year, so I didn't have to worry about the work that was waiting when I came back. I set up a reintegration fund that I would have for, my goal was to have for 2 months so that I could come back and find a position. I'm going to try to unplug my camera and replug it in. Let's see if that works, guys.